His eyes are closed, and we didn't look at the photograph at all.
For 30 years, he walked through doors carrying a briefcase and a smile. The neighbors called him their beloved doctor. Patients felt relief just hearing his name. Families opened the door without hesitation, because it was him, because he was the doctor, because it was safe. No one realized that each visit could be the last. Harold Frederick Shipman, general practitioner, family physician, respected man in Hyde, England. When police finally arrived with the right answers, they uncovered something that makes the human mind simply freeze. At least 218 confirmed murders. Perhaps 250. Perhaps far more. And that, perhaps, is the most disturbing detail in this entire story. Because when a killer acts in the shadows, he leaves traces. But when he acts inside homes, inside offices, wearing a white coat and speaking gentle words, the trace disappears. And the victims are buried with the cause of death, signed by the same hand that killed them. This is the story of the most prolific serial killer in modern British history, and arguably in the history of the world. If this opening already has you hooked, what comes next is going to be even more disturbing. Drop a like right now, subscribe to the channel, and if the option to hype the video appears, use it. That helps this story reach more people. There is a kind of trust we place in doctors that we rarely place in anyone else. We open the door and say, "Come in, doctor." We become vulnerable in a way that almost no other relationship demands. Harold Shipman spent decades exploiting exactly that vulnerability. Most people know the name. Very few understand the true extent. He was born on January 14th, 1946, in Nottingham, England. He grew up in a working-class family, the second of 4 children. Life at home was simple, nothing excessive, but there was something there that shaped Harold in ways few people noticed at the time. He was his mother's favorite. Vera Shipman was a strong, demanding woman who believed her middle son was special, and Harold grew up believing it too. While his siblings played, went out, lived, Harold stayed home, close to his mother, absorbing her every word as if they were instructions for life. Classmates described him as distant, arrogant even. He didn't mix with others, didn't have the circle of friends other boys had. But this never seemed to bother Harold, because he simply didn't believe other people were on the same level as him. And Vera reinforced that belief every single day. When Harold was 17, Vera was diagnosed with lung cancer. What happened in the months that followed was etched into the teenager's memory in a way he could never erase. And that perhaps explains a great deal. Vera suffered greatly. The only relief came from a family doctor who visited the house regularly. He administered morphine injections, and within minutes Vera would grow calm. Her face would relax. Her breathing would slow. The suffering simply disappeared. Harold sat in the corner of the room, watching everything in silence. He watched morphine do what nothing else could, silence the pain. He saw the power that doctor carried in his bag, the ability to arrive, administer, and transform a scene of suffering into absolute peace. And he saw how everyone in the house looked at that man with a gratitude he had never seen directed at anyone else. Vera Shipman died in June 1963. Harold was 17 years old. He entered the University of Leeds in 1965. Dedicated, disciplined, intelligent. He graduated in 1970 and a year later began working as a general practitioner in a small town called Todmorden in the English countryside. It was also in Todmorden that Harold met Primrose May Oxtoby. She was 16 when they met. Her parents were skeptical. They found the young man strange, too cold. But Primrose fell in love. They married in 1966, when she was 17 and already expecting their first child. Over time, they had 4 children. And throughout their entire life together, Primrose never questioned her husband. Not once. That blind loyalty will matter later. It was in Todmorden that the first warning sign appeared. But no one paid attention. In 1975, Shipman was caught diverting pethidine, a powerful opioid, from the clinic where he worked. He forged prescriptions in patients' names to stockpile the drug, using some of it himself. He was fired, fined, and referred to addiction treatment. But he was never imprisoned, and he was never barred from practicing medicine again. A doctor caught diverting narcotics, forging prescriptions, a confirmed addict, received treatment, paid a fine, and 3 years later was working in another practice. This time in Hyde, in the county of Greater Manchester. What no one knew and only later investigation would reveal, is that Shipman's first confirmed victim had already died by this point. Eva Lyons, 71 years old, a patient in Todmorden. She died in March 1975 during a home visit from Dr. Shipman. The declared cause, cancer. But cancer did not kill Eva Lyons. What killed her was a massive dose of morphine administered by a doctor who had just discovered the pleasure of controlling when a life ends. In Hyde, Harold Shipman built the longest and most successful facade in the history of British crime. Hyde was a small town with quiet neighborhoods, many retirees and working-class families. The kind of place where everyone knows each other, where a doctor who comes to your home is seen as a hero, where the community trusts its institutions. Shipman opened his own practice on Market Street in 1993 after years in a group clinic. And it was that independence that accelerated everything. With no other doctors around to question him, no need to justify decisions to colleagues. He had absolute control over records, prescriptions, and death certificates. He was different from other doctors. He had patience. He had time. He made house calls, something rarely seen in that era. He talked. He asked about the family. He drank tea in the kitchen while listening to the concerns of the elderly. The town's women adored him. They called the clinic asking specifically for Dr. Shipman, and he would show up with the briefcase, with the smile, with the syringe. Patients described a reassuring presence. He spoke slowly, with authority, but without ever seeming threatening. When he entered a sick room, the anxiety seemed to lift. People breathed more easily just having him there. They felt safe. The method was always the same. An injection of morphine, the medical form of heroin, in a dose far above what was necessary. The victim would go into rapid cardiorespiratory collapse. And since Shipman was the same doctor who signed the cause of death, he would write whatever he chose: cardiac failure, natural causes, expected death given the patient's condition. But there was one detail he cultivated carefully. He always made sure to be present at the moment of death. When families called to say their mother was unwell, he would come. And when he came, he was usually the last to leave. One of the victims was Winifred Meller, 73 years old, a widow. She lived alone in Hyde. She was known in the neighborhood for her energy, her lively personality. The garden she kept immaculate in her backyard. Dr. Shipman had been her physician for years. In May 1998, just months before his arrest, Shipman visited Winifred's home for a routine check. Her family found her dead hours later, sitting in the armchair in her living room. The death certificate said cardiac failure. The family found it strange, but didn't question it. It was Dr. Shipman who said so, and Dr. Shipman never got things wrong. Another victim was Joan Melia, 73 years old, also from Hyde, also found sitting in a chair, also with a certificate signed by Dr. Shipman, also described as healthy and active by those who knew her. And there was Mary Quinn, and Ivy Lomas, and Laura Kathleen Wagstaff. Each name was a life. Each life had a family, had a story, had a morning when someone opened the door without imagining what was coming. But there was a loose thread. There's always a loose thread. In 1997, a doctor named Linda Reynolds, who worked at a neighboring clinic in Hyde, began noticing something disturbing. There were too many deaths among Dr. Shipman's patients. Deaths that followed a nearly identical pattern. Elderly women found dead at home after a visit from the doctor, sitting in an armchair or lying on the sofa, fully dressed, as if they were simply resting. Linda Reynolds approached the local funeral director and asked whether he had noticed anything unusual. He had. Together, they went to the local coroner, the official responsible for investigating suspicious deaths. The coroner listened, considered, and closed the matter. There was no concrete evidence. Shipman was a respected physician. The mortality rate among the elderly was naturally high. There was nothing to be done. Linda Reynolds was dismissed, and Shipman continued. This moment is one of the most disturbing in the entire story, because there was someone who saw, there was someone who spoke, and the system responded. It's nothing, go back to work. In August 1998, a patient named Kathleen Grundy was found dead at home. She was 81 years old, a former mayor of Hyde, an active, well-regarded woman in the community. Harold Shipman had visited her that morning, and he had also signed the death certificate hours later, declaring death from natural causes related to old age. What Shipman didn't know was that Kathleen Grundy had a daughter, and that daughter was a solicitor. Angela Woodruff was suspicious from the very first moment. Her mother had been well. She had been visited by the doctor in the morning and was dead by the afternoon. But there was an even stranger detail. A new will had appeared, supposedly signed by Kathleen, oddly written, with spelling errors that a woman of her education would never have made. And this will left the entire estate to Dr. Harold Shipman. Angela Woodruff went to the police. Kathleen Grundy's body was exhumed. The toxicological analysis was damning. An overwhelming concentration of morphine was found in the tissue, far above anything any medical treatment could justify. A quantity consistent with intentional murder by overdose. The police began to investigate, and the deeper they dug, the more the ground disappeared beneath their feet. Shipman had falsified the medical records of dozens of patients, inserting histories of illnesses that never existed, invented symptoms, fabricated deteriorations, all to justify deaths that should never have happened. But when forensic computer experts analyzed those records, they discovered something Shipman had not accounted for. The system automatically logged the exact date and time each entry had been created or modified. And in many cases, the alterations had been made after the patients had died, sometimes hours later, sometimes minutes. He was rewriting the history of the dead while the bodies were still warm. Investigators also discovered that Shipman had accumulated a vast supply of morphine over the years, prescribing higher than necessary doses for terminally ill patients and keeping the surplus. It was a clandestine stockpile of poison kept at home, in his bag, in the locked drawers of his practice. The same drug he had diverted 20 years earlier in Todmorden, this time accumulated not out of personal addiction, but as an instrument of murder. Harold Frederick Shipman was arrested in September 1998. In January 2000, after a trial lasting nearly 2 months, he was convicted of 15 murders and the forgery of Kathleen Grundy's will. Sentence: life imprisonment, with no possibility of parole. The judge declared he should never leave prison. But 15 was only the beginning. Throughout the trial, Shipman maintained the same composure he had held for decades, serene, confident, mildly condescending. He showed no remorse. He showed no fear. He looked at the jury as if they were students in a classroom and he were the teacher. Primrose, the wife who never questioned anything, sat in the gallery every day and publicly declared her belief in her husband's innocence. To this day, there are doubts about how much she truly knew. The inquiry that followed the trial, led by Dame Janet Smith, lasted another 2 years and produced a report thousands of pages long. Medical records of more than 500 patients who died under Shipman's care throughout his career were reviewed. Families, colleagues, pharmacists, and hospital staff were interviewed. Causes of death were examined that, taken together, formed a pattern impossible to ignore. The conclusion was devastating. Harold Shipman had murdered, to a proven degree of certainty, 218 people. But the final report indicated that the true figure likely exceeded 250. Some cases were impossible to prove because the bodies had been cremated, leaving no physical evidence. Shipman knew this. Whenever he could, he recommended cremation. Ashes don't speak. The majority of victims were women. Many were over 70. Some were over 90. The youngest Dame Janet Smith's report was also brutally honest about the failures of the system. She identified at least 3 moments when someone could have stopped Harold Shipman. When he was caught diverting drugs in 1975 and was allowed to return to practice as if nothing had happened. When Linda Reynolds went to the coroner in 1997 and was ignored. And when the British death registration system itself, which could have cross-referenced the data and identified the pattern, simply was not designed to do that. More than 320 families paid the price for those failures. What remains so difficult to understand, what keeps any investigator awake at 3 in the morning trying to piece it together, is the motive. Shipman did not kill for money, at least not in the overwhelming majority of cases. The episode of Kathleen Grundy's will seem more like an experiment in arrogance than a planned financial scheme. There was no lover, no gambling debt, none of the classic motives that tend to appear in this kind of crime. The criminologists who studied the case for decades arrived at theories that fit together like pieces of a dark puzzle. The first leads directly back to that bedroom in Nottingham. The 17-year-old sitting in the corner, watching the doctor with the syringe. Shipman had witnessed firsthand the transformative power of morphine, had seen how a substance administered by skilled hands could silence the suffering of someone he loved. and he had seen how that act granted the doctor an almost religious reverence from everyone around him. Over time, that fascination with power evolved within Harold into something far more absolute: the power to control when a life ends. The second theory points to the narcissistic profile Shipman displayed throughout his life. He grew up believing he was superior. He chose victims who could not defend themselves, who depended on his medical authority to assess their own health. And there was a clear pleasure, identified by experts, in being present at the moment of another person's death, in being the last face someone sees, in being, literally, the end. There was also a third theory, related to control. Shipman lived under constant pressure, a reputation to maintain, a practice to run, a family to support. Inside the consulting room, he was the man with all the answers. Outside it, he was an ordinary human being with ordinary limitations. And the murders, according to this line of analysis, were the space where he exercised total and irrevocable power, something no one could undo. The narcissism was absolute. The sense of omnipotence was complete, and impunity had fed it for decades. On January 13, 2004, one day before his 58th birthday, Harold Shipman was found dead in his cell at Wakefield Prison. He had hanged himself with bedsheets tied to the window bars. His death was confirmed at 6 in the morning. He left no note, no confession, not a single word for the hundreds of families still searching for answers. But there was one cruel and symbolic detail about that day. Had Shipman reached 60 years of age while in prison, Primrose's pension would have been larger. By dying before 60, his wife would receive less. Some investigators speculated that Shipman had calculated even this, that his own death had been timed to deprive Primrose of a greater benefit. One final act of control over the people around him. That last silence was, perhaps, the ultimate expression of power from a man who had spent his entire life believing he was above everyone else. The families of the victims received the news of Shipman's death in very different ways. Some felt relief. Others felt rage, because he had escaped any possibility of confrontation, any obligation to explain what he had done and why. Many still live today with a wound that never fully healed, because there was never a confession. There was never a moment when Harold Shipman looked someone in the eye and told the truth. The final investigation report estimated that Shipman likely committed his first murder in 1971, at the very start of his career. His last victim was in 1998, just months before his arrest. More than 25 years. At least 218 confirmed lives. Families who never learned how their own loved ones truly died. The Shipman case irreversibly transformed the British medical system. New legislation was created to completely overhaul the process for issuing death certificates in the United Kingdom. A double verification system was implemented, requiring a second doctor with no connection to the case to confirm the cause of death before cremation. Access to opioids became far more rigorously tracked. Warning mechanisms were created to identify suspicious patterns of mortality linked to specific healthcare professionals. Necessary reforms. Reforms that came far too late for more than 200 people. To this day, crime historians debate whether Shipman was the most prolific serial killer in modern history. The official figures place him there. No other serial killer with confirmed cases comes close to his total victim count. But what truly horrifies is not the number. It is the method, the patience, the capacity to smile, to sit down, to drink tea in the kitchen of an 80-year-old woman knowing exactly what he was about to do, and to repeat that week after week, year after year, for more than 2 decades. The trust those women placed in him was genuine, and he used that trust as a weapon, turning the most human gesture there is, the act of caring for another, into a deadly trap. There is something profoundly disturbing about realizing that danger can come from where you least expect it, not from the shadow of an alley, not from a stranger with a frightening face, but from a familiar face, from a medical bag, from someone you call by name and invite inside. Kathleen Grundy, Winifred Meller, Joan Melia, Mary Quinn, Ivy Lomas, and more than 200 confirmed names. Each one a story that was cut short by a man who believed he had the right to decide the ending. While Harold Shipman existed, death wore a white coat. And the most frightening thought of all is not about him. It is about the system that allowed him to exist for so long. About the mechanisms that failed. About the doctor who spoke and was not heard. about the coroner who dismissed the warning, about the crowd of deaths that no one bothered to connect. Harold Shipman was not an isolated phenomenon of human nature. He was the product of a system that trusted authority figures too much and questioned too little what was happening behind closed doors. And that is the thought you are left with today. Do you believe a case like this could still happen, with all the oversight systems that now exist? What allows crimes like this to go on for so long, without anyone being able to stop them? Let us know in the comments. If this story stayed with you, drop a like, turn on notifications, and subscribe to the channel. Every next video goes deep into another case the world almost let slip by.